And so welcome to the Environmental Rotary Club of Puget Sound. I'm happy to see you all here. And we have a wonderful guest speaker today, Caitlin Kinn, staff attorney for the Puget Sound Keepers. And so maybe before we turn the mic over to her, we can do some introductions. My name is Kimberly Peterson, and I'm the president of the Environmental Rotary Club of Puget Sound. And I'm very excited to be here. Kay, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Kay Peterson, and I am the proud mother of Kimberly, who's my also newly minted attorney. So we have two of you on the line today. And then from a district perspective, I am in line to be the district governor in 22-23 for a Rotary here in the Puget Sound area.
Excellent. Janice, would you like to introduce yourself? You're on mute.
Hi, I'm Janice Hogat. I'm currently a member of Lake Forest Park Rotary, soon to be a member of the Environmental Club of Puget Sound, and have worked with Waterkeeper, Stream Keepers, and Puget Sound Keepers in the past. I'm really looking forward to hearing Kimberly speak today. I will be the incoming president after Miss Kimberly.
All right, Chris, would you like to introduce yourself? Oh, you're also on mute.
I hit the button. Don't know what to say. Working from home today. So good afternoon. I'm Chris Overlease, and I'm new to Rotary, and I'm just excited about this club and happy to meet you all and look forward to hearing our speaker today. Thank you.
Excellent. And Valerie?
Hi, I'm Valerie Stewart. I also go by Val. I am a current member of the Rotary Club of Duval, and I'm also really excited to join this club.
Yes, she is our newest charter member. So welcome, Valerie.
Yay, welcome.
And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Caitlin Kinn. I will share the screen.
Kim, I think John's here.
Oh, where's John?
He's at the bottom of my screen.
Oh, John, welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself, John?
He might have stepped away.
All right. Well, I think you should be able to share your screen, Caitlin. Can you press that button and share the screen?
It's still saying host disabled attendee screen sharing.
Let's try advanced. Oh, here we go. All right, now let's try it. It should work.
Great.
Wonderful. Excellent. Would you like to introduce yourself and then go ahead with your presentation?
Sure. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin Kinn with Puget Soundkeeper. Let me start from the beginning of the slideshow, and let me know if you can see the first slide. It's working. Okay, fantastic. How many of you have heard of Puget Soundkeeper before today? Awesome. Okay, so some of us, some not so much. So I'll give all the background, and for anyone this is repetitive for, sorry about that. I would love to open it up for questions at any point in time. Do you have a certain format you'd like to follow for questions, or?
I think people are welcome to put questions in the chat, or because there aren't that many of us, we can just call on people as they have questions.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I'm not able to see the chat at the moment, so please let me know if there's a question that comes up, and I'll.
Okay, wonderful.
Cool. Okay.
I'll be the chat monitor.
Thank you. So I always like to start with a little bit about who I am and why I do this work so that you know who you're talking to. This is me as a little girl. My dad started a charter fishing business on Lake Michigan in Northeast Wisconsin. And so I grew up on the water on Lake Michigan, and my family was very reliant on the health of the waterway. And we were a fishing family that ate a lot of fish from the lake. And it was always really clear to me that water pollution was a big deal, and that for people who relied on the health of waterways, it was really important for us to keep them clean. So that's a direct thread that has led to where I am today as Soundkeeper's clean water attorney. So Puget Soundkeeper is a nonprofit organization. It is one of the Waterkeepers, which I'll get into a little bit on the next slide. But we are based in Seattle, though we're currently all working from home. So I'm joining you from my house in Bremerton. But the organization works to protect a really vast area, right? All of Puget Sound. So that is over 1,000 streams and rivers and creeks, 2,500 river miles and shoreline miles, really vast watershed. And we really do work to protect everything in the watershed, the marine waters, the freshwater tributaries, everything from the crest of the Cascades and the Olympics all the way out to the Straits. We were formed in 1984, and we were the 6th organization to join the Waterkeeper Movement. So the Waterkeeper Movement is now over 300 organizations around the globe. There's an Upper Tigris Riverkeeper in Iraq. There are riverkeepers in Australia, Sweden, lots in India and Bangladesh, all over the world. And we all follow the similar model. And the origins of that model were in the 1980s on the Hudson River in New York. And at that time, there was a commercial fisherman named John Cronin, whose livelihood, as a fisher person, was impacted by big pollution getting into the Hudson River. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a new attorney at that time, stepped in and realized that the Clean Water Act, the Federal Clean Water Act, could be used to represent community members like John Cronin and his friends and family to stop big pollution from entering waterways. So it's this interesting federal law that still exists today and is even much stronger today than it was at that time, that actually allows for public enforcement. So where the government is not willing or able to act, community groups like Puget Soundkeeper come in and file legal action and require change to happen as a result. So I'll talk more about that. So the reason that we exist and that our mission is to protect and recover Puget Sound is because, as beautiful as Puget Sound is, and as much as it attracts people from all over the world and keeps us living here because of how amazing it is in trouble. Under the surface, there are serious pollution issues, toxic pollution that gets in from stormwater, nutrient pollution, sourced from several different places, but including wastewater treatment plants, agricultural runoff, and nutrient pollution actually creates these dead zones in waterways where the oxygen is so low that fish aren't able to survive. Toxic pollution, on the other hand, builds up in fish's flesh and bodies over time and causes inability to spawn and create new fish. This is an outfall that there are thousands and thousands of all around Puget Sound. So every time there's a big rain, which of course it rains a lot, the hard surfaces are washed by that rainwater, and the rainwater gets into the local waterway, bringing along with it everything that was on that hard surface or parking lot. Stormwater pollution is a big deal. So we work to address these various pollution sources in hopes of keeping Puget Sound cleaner and allowing it to recover healthfully. These are a couple of the facilities that we've recently worked with, brought legal action against to require them to come into compliance. This is on the Duwamish River in Seattle. This is a big metal shredder right on the river. And so as you can imagine, when it rains, what's getting into the river is really, really dirty. And this photo on the right actually shows the outfall, and that sudsy white water is their discharge to the river. These photos just show a little bit about the nutrients pollution that I was talking about. On the left is a large scale, it's a concentrated animal feeding operation, but a food producing animal farm. And then on the right is the waste processing for residential uses. Every time we take a shower or flush the toilet, if it goes to a city, and unless you have a septic system, this is West Point in Seattle. So part of Discovery Park in Seattle, this is one of the places that processes municipal waste. And then with the stormwater, of course, originally this region was heavily forested, a combination of forest and wetlands. And today a lot of that, at least around the urban areas, has been paved and made into hard surfaces. So the ground no longer absorbs the rain the way that it used to. It collects and creates this issue of both volume and pollutant concentration. Another issue that we work on is marine debris. I'm sure you've noticed if you've walked along beaches along the area, is there is often trash, unfortunately. And sometimes it's coming from the land of folks who go down and maybe party by the waterway, something like that. And sometimes it's washing up from the beach itself. It's not uncommon to find trash that's traveled all the way over from Asia, especially out on the straits and the coast. But plastic in particular is a big problem because most types of plastic never actually fully break down. They just photodegrade. So they get smaller and smaller over time, break down into microplastics. The picture on the lower right shows fibers that have come off of clothing, synthetic clothing in the washing machine. Those fibers are getting into waterways through laundry water. Plastics are a big issue that we're trying to work on, both with cleanups and also with advocacy around how to filter out sources of plastics before they get in the waterway, and how to control them at the source from a production perspective. So our main strategies kind of fall into these three buckets: monitoring and enforcement, which is where I do most of my work as our attorney, right? And then policy and civic engagement, and education and stewardship. So I'll touch on each of those a little bit. So here's a picture of one of our attorneys arguing a case before the Washington Supreme Court. We don't always bring our cases up to the Washington Supreme Court, but in some cases we have to, and we're certainly willing to. We have a pretty robust litigation docket. At any one point in time, we have between 10 and 15 lawsuits going. And most of these are against corporations, larger industrial facilities. Sometimes we also litigate against cities, counties. And it is in almost every case, it's to enforce an existing regulation, to bring a facility into compliance with a Clean Water Act permit. So a couple of examples of how we get the information that leads to this legal action. Two different examples here on the left. This is a photograph of an actual facility that we actually used as evidence in one of our cases. Somebody walking along the Seattle waterfront. There's the Myrtle Edwards Park and the big grain terminal at Pier 86. And they saw the conveyor system here dumping just hundreds and hundreds of pounds of soybeans directly into the bay, right there between the dock and the ship. If you can see kind of the white area under the dock, that's soybeans going directly into the water. And soybeans aren't necessarily as toxic as some other pollutants, but they certainly don't belong in Elliott Bay. They create a really serious problem for habitat. And so we were able to enforce regulations against this facility, Louis Dreyfus Grain Terminal. And today their equipment no longer physically allows for discharges like that. So there are protective measures in place. And they had to pay a payment in lieu of a penalty to local community groups to mitigate the damage associated with that harm. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But on the right is another, actually more common example of how we get this information. This is just one little screenshot from some public records that we acquired in some research that we did for a Boeing facility down in Tukwila on the Duwamish River. And we suspected that there were PCBs coming from this Boeing site. And this shows some of the monitoring that had happened at the site. And each of those pink dots show levels of PCBs that are still in excess of what's healthy for fish and people. And Boeing had taken these samples of the concrete joint material on one of their runways. And the sample data existed in the public record. The public agencies knew about it, but they just weren't doing anything to require Boeing to actually remediate the harm and make sure that that wasn't getting into the waterway. Is there a question?
Would you be able to explain what a PCB is?
Sure. So PCB is a polychlorinated biphenyl. It's a man-made pollutant, basically, that is meant to last for a really long time. It can be really helpful as an additive to plastics and motor oil and things like that. It makes them very strong and last a really long time, but it's proven to be a carcinogen and really harmful to marine life and to people. And it's one of the pollutants that builds up in tissues over time. So you've probably potentially heard about the baby orca that died, and its mother carried it around for several weeks through Puget Sound a couple of years ago. It's actually not uncommon for mother orcas to lose their first, second, and even third calves, largely because of toxic pollution like this. For mammals that lactate and feed their young their milk, the way that orcas do, as some humans do, PCBs pass through that milk to the young. So orca calves that are drinking PCB-laden milk from their mothers carry too much of a burden and sometimes pass away as a result. So PCBs are heavily toxic to fish and people. So in the case of this Boeing facility, we brought the lawsuit against Boeing and successfully required them to pull out this PCB-laden material so that it wouldn't wash off and get into the Duwamish River. And one of the things that happens with these lawsuits is if we were to argue a judgment all the way to the end of a trial and have a judge decide the outcome of the case, then they would send a certain amount of money to the US Treasury as a penalty. And that's what's written into the Clean Water Act statute. That's to mitigate the harm that's caused and to dissuade that type of behavior. We would much rather keep that money in Puget Sound. And so we most often, in almost every case, are able to cooperatively resolve the lawsuit before it goes to trial. So we engage in a lot of settlement negotiations. We go to mediation with defendants, and we are able to reach an agreement that provides for them to pay a certain amount of money to Puget Sound groups in the waterway that was actually impacted. So if we have a case in Commencement Bay in Tacoma, then the money that comes from that is going to go to other organizations, not Puget Soundkeeper, and it's going to go to work in Commencement Bay in South Puget Sound. So to date, we have caused shifting of money from polluters to local community groups of nearly $9 million. And last year, that was just over 1.5 for just that year. These are administered through grants, so folks have to apply for this funding, and then it's tracked. The Department of Justice receives reports about it. All of it is available online if you're interested in what types of projects are funded. Right now we have a professional foundation called the Rose Foundation helping to administer those funds because the dollar amounts were just getting too high for us to do it in-house. So in order for us to have laws to enforce, the laws have to be strong enough to begin with. And that's where our policy and civic engagement works comes in. Here we are down in Olympia for one of our policy days, fighting for stronger Puget Sound protections. You know, our lawmakers, our senators and representatives listen to people when they express their voices. And so we try to just generate that community voice and be there to balance out industry lobbyists who also have really strong loud voices. And our goal is to have stronger regulations to protect Puget Sound. So right now we're in a legislative session in Olympia, and this is a wordy slide. Sorry about that. I try to just focus on pictures, but this one's important. It's so relevant for the moment. These are our 4 current priorities for the bills and the legislative initiatives that we're promoting and supporting. The first one was Senate Bill 5022, and it's around reducing our reliance on single-use plastics. So if passed, it phases out the use of the most commonly used styrofoam. It requires restaurants around Washington state to ask before giving single-use plastics like straws and forks, plastic forks, things like that. They're still available, that they just have to ask instead of automatically providing them. And then it requires this phasing in of recycled content for plastic bottles over time. The other one is more funding for wastewater treatment plants to be able to improve their treatment systems over time, especially for the smaller municipalities that are lesser funded. And it creates this $9 million allocation in the budget that would allow them to do a better job at removing nitrogen pollution from their discharges. The third one is the HEAL Act, and this one feels really important for Soundkeeper, with the reality being that racially marginalized communities have taken the brunt of pollution worldwide, but certainly in the US and certainly in the Puget Sound region. And historically, their voices have been silenced. So this requires the government to be working directly with representatives from impacted communities. If anytime decisions are being made around environment and conservation, it creates an advisory committee that has an oversight and accountability role. And it provides for funds to be brought back into impacted communities as a priority. The fourth one is the Washington Strong. This one's really important and groundbreaking. I think there are actually 11 states in the US that are proposing similar carbon tax, climate resilience bills at the moment. It'll be interesting to see which ones pass. I know California and Oregon have bills. I think folks are looking to Washington to take a lead on this issue, and it'll be interesting to see if this one passes, but it would put in place a bonding program that would be repaid by a carbon tax to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. A lot of info on that one. Any questions that came up? Maybe. So some of the work that the volunteers get most involved in with our community and is really near and dear to my heart, even though I'm our attorney in my stewardship work, because it's what provides this physical connection for people to their local waterways, and that's just so important. One product of our education and stewardship program is this app that I would encourage you to download if you do the apps on phones and devices thing. It's called the Swim Guide. You can just search Swim Guide, and you can also go onto our website and it has a direct link. But it allows for you to kind of check for your local waterway and how clean it might be on any given moment. So it has real water quality data, and the goal is to tell you whether or not it's safe for swimming. Not everyone swims around Puget Sound. Probably this time of year, very few people do. Though I'm in contact with a group of Western Washington open water swimmers that swim at Elki year-round. Amazing group. If you're ever interested, I swam with them on Christmas Eve a couple of years ago. It's pretty cool. But in any event, this is a cool app to get more in touch with how clean is your local waterway or not. And if not, what can potentially be done about it and what pollutants exist. Another really cool tool that we have on our website that has different layers of different information that you can kind of click and see what the map is going to look like if you want to see what projects we're working on, past lawsuits we've resolved, different layers. It's called Our Puget Sound, and it's we call it an interactive mapping tool, but I would really encourage you to go and explore that. It's another way to get good information around Puget Sound. And then we do dozens and dozens of beach cleanups all around Puget Sound every year. This past year was different, certainly because of limited in-person interactions and restrictions on group gatherings. We encouraged, through social media, folks to kind of do their own cleanups with the people that they live with and to be really careful about social distancing. But normally our cleanups gather groups of people who remove hundreds, if not thousands of pounds of trash from a local beach on a given day. There are great opportunities for folks to come out and volunteer and get involved if that's something that ever interests you. We are also doing this big project in coordination with the University of Puget Sound around microplastics monitoring. So I mentioned that plastics and fibers from synthetic clothing photodegrade over time, but don't really go away. So we decided to send folks out and take samples, and we process them at the lab in our office. It's a simple analysis of presence or absence, so it's not documenting the volume or type necessarily of microplastic, but it's just saying whether or not it exists in a given sample. Spoiler alert, we are finding microplastics in every single sample. So it's ubiquitous, it is everywhere. I recently learned that the average Puget Sound resident consumes a credit card size amount of microplastics every single week. So it's in our food systems, it's in the water we're drinking. A lot has to be learned about how that's impacting our bodies, but it's an issue, certainly. Another issue that happens that really impacts in our urban streams are salmon runs that we're trying to recover, particularly for coho salmon. Is, the life cycle of a salmon is really fascinating. You may know this, but I just love talking about it. Salmon are born in a particular creek or stream, and then they stay there until they're just big enough to get out and survive getting out through, different hurdles out to the open water in Puget Sound. And then they go out to the ocean for a period of 2 to 3 years, depending on their species. And then they make their way all the way back to the exact segment of the stream where they were born in order to spawn. And that journey is a vital part of the life cycle. And what we're finding in urban creeks and streams around Puget Sound is that, in particular, coho salmon, they make it all the way back for that journey and they die right before being able to spawn because of the toxicity of that urban creek and stream. So there are scientists around Puget Sound that are just in the process of pinpointing what pollutant is it that's causing that. And they discovered a few years ago that it is some part of tire rubber. So it's coming off of the roadways, as we're applying brakes and as roads are, cars and trucks are driving around, something in tire rubber is getting ground off onto the pavement, washing into creeks and streams and impacting salmon in this way that they're dying before they're able to spawn. So we have volunteers during spawning season that go out every week, walk these creeks and streams, do on-site necropsies to see if the fish has spawned or not. This fish is full of eggs, so that's how we know it hasn't spawned yet. And they're documenting that, and it's going into an important study that is showing us the extent of the problem. Another kind of community science project that we're working on is mussel cage deployment and analysis. This is in coordination with a bunch of agencies and groups around Puget Sound. Every other year, we take cages of live mussels and go down at a really low tide, which is usually in the middle of the night. So you see these folks are out at about, I think this year it was around 2 a.m. and they anchor these cages of live mussels into the water, and then they leave them for usually about 45 days. Mussels are really amazing filters. So they actually remove pollutants from a waterway, and they can also be used to tell you how much and what type of pollutants exist in that waterway. So these mussels are harvested after that 45-day period and sent to a lab, ground up, and telling us what type of pollution exists in that waterway. So this site, I think both these pictures were taken at Smith Cove in Seattle, and it tells us, where PCBs are present, which heavy metals are present, and all important data to show us the extent of the pollution problem in certain locations so that we know what sources to focus on. So each of those activities that I mentioned, you can actually volunteer for because we're a small staff. Right now we have 10 staff members. So we're a small team, but we get a lot of work done in large part because we rely on our volunteers. So if any of that work that I just talked about particularly interests you, or if you have a friend or family member who might be interested, please go to our website and check it out, because we rely on folks to pitch in with these projects, and it's a really cool way to get involved. That's me and my presentation. I'd love to see if there are questions, and if I don't know the answer, I can get back to you or steer you in the right direction.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. Thank you. We had a couple of people join us since you began your speech. So, Ananda, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Ananda. What do you want to know?
Just your name and why you're here.
So I've been involved in Shoreline Rotary for a while, but I like the idea of an environmental Rotary Club, and I want to support it and see it get big. And so that's why I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you so much. You're very welcome to be here. And John, hello. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, yeah, that better?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, well, I helped set up this club, although I'm a member of the Fremont Club, which has a significant amount of waterway that we've paid no attention to, and around our club. And so I would like to stir a little interest in the club and getting in these kind of projects. I probably will stay with my club because it's small, and if I leave, it will significantly impact our ability to do projects. I'm an emeritus professor at the University of Washington in the Department of Environmental.
Well, John, you're very welcome to join at any time as a guest. And what my hope is that once we're chartered, that people from other clubs are welcome and free to join whenever there's an interesting speaker. So. Well,
I expect to do that, of course.
Yes. So you're always welcome to be here.
John, sorry to interrupt. I've been meaning to visit your club because I work in Fremont.
Well, why don't you? Like, we don't meet.
Sorry,
except
Kimberly.
We meet by Zoom on usually starting at 6 o'clock on Wednesday. And if you want, I can send you there's one connection. Once you know it, it's the same every week.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Does anyone have any questions for Caitlin?
Yeah, so Caitlin, how is the Streamkeeper, how are you funded and financed as a nonprofit?
Great question. So we're a member-based organization, so we rely a lot on individual contributions. The only reason that we're able to bring the cases that we bring and do any of the work that we do is because folks join as a member. So if anyone's interested in doing that, it's all available on our website. But we also get really great support from local businesses. We have some government grant and contracts. And then there are institutional funders, we apply for grants and then report back to those funders. And there are some really great institutions in the Puget Sound region that have supported our work for a long time, and that keeps us going.
Wonderful. All right. Well, while you guys, Ananda, please go.
I have a question. Well, you were just talking about your volunteers and volunteer projects, and I was actually thinking about it in terms of potential Rotary projects, but how much of your volunteer work is sort of long-term assignment, sort of ongoing stuff versus a one day work project kind of thing? What types of volunteer opportunities do you have is really what I'm asking.
Yeah, there's definitely both. We have cleanup events in a normal year. Right now it's a little strange with COVID. Normally we have cleanup events where you can just sign up online to come out for one afternoon for an hour or 2 or 3 hours, and just that can be it. You can bring your group and do that, and that's it. We also do patrols. So every Wednesday morning, we are in a kayak out on a patrol collecting garbage and monitoring for pollution in Lake Union. So for the Fremont Club, that might be a really cool opportunity. And that can also be a one-time thing too. But if you're interested in the salmon pre-spawn mortality surveys, we provided quite a bit of training for the volunteers so we asked them to sign up to be, in partners on a seasonal basis. And so at the beginning of the season, we provide the training, and then we ask you to kind of stick around for a couple of months. So for folks who want more hours, that's a good thing. So I would say we have opportunities kind of across the spectrum. And we have a person on our staff who's even better than certainly I am at describing all that, because that's her focus. She's our stewardship engagement person who can, manages all the volunteers. And so if you're interested in getting a group or yourself involved, email or reach out to her, and she can kind of help figure out what's the best spot.
That's wonderful. Would you mind emailing me her contact information?
No, I'll do that. Good idea.
Wonderful. Perfect. Great. Well, I wanted to let you guys know about an event that we're co-hosting on Friday night. There is a movie called Chasing Ice, and it's a National Geographic photographer who devoted several years of his life to documenting changes in the ice in Greenland and how spectacularly it sometimes changed. And it looks like a super exciting movie, and it's on Friday from 7 to 9. And on our Facebook page, you'll find the link where you can join, and we can all watch it together. Bring your own popcorn. And then I'm working on the speaker for the end of March. And I think I have a tentative agreement with Matthew Axe, who is the wildfire supervisor for the King Conservative District. And he will talk about wildfire mitigation and sort of projects that can happen in King County to reduce fire risk and increase sustainability. So I'm really looking forward to that. And we will be having a meeting on March 9th, which will be more of a planning meeting and a networking opportunity where we can discuss possibly changing the day of the week that we meet if it suits other people better to meet on a different day of the week. I wanted to ask you a question, Caitlin, about the movie Dark Waters that came out last year, the Mark Ruffalo movie. I don't know if you saw it, but it's a drama about PFAS. And I was wondering if Puget Soundkeepers has a position on the chemical PFAS and how it's measured and how it is regulated and all that sort of thing.
Good question. Yeah. So I've worked a little bit on this issue, but I should check in with our policy person to see if we currently have an official position. I mean, my sense is that it's known in scientifically to be a toxic pollutant. So we certainly would be in favor of restricting and regulating it wherever possible to keep it out of Puget Sound. I know a big problem with PFAS is also getting into drinking water sources. Right. It seems to me like some of the biggest sources, I'm curious now about the film. I should definitely go see it.
It's a great film, well worth watching.
Yeah, did it show that some of the sources were firefighting foam and sometimes
for the most part, it focused on 3M and how it was dumping the waste from its manufacturing plants into barrels.
Okay. So not in Puget Sound, but that was some other place.
No, it was not in Puget Sound, but it's all about the first case in West Virginia and the long and difficult path to get justice. Yeah. But it has a happy ending.
Okay, good. Well, then I definitely want to see it. But I know we have our own local issues with PFAS, and my understanding is that especially military firefighting foam is one of our biggest sources. And so that brings up the complex conversation around Homeland Security and the need to put out fires, of course, when we have them. But I know that some of our more local fire programs are no longer using foam that contains PFAS, which is really important. So it can be phased out. We just have to get the military there.
Yeah.
More detail than that, I should check with our policy person.
Yeah, I was at a conference last year where they were saying that for like electrical fires or gasoline fires, that not using PFAS means like blowing up the port instead of putting out the fire.
Yeah, it's hard.
And so if there's an alternative, that's wonderful. But as of last year, I don't think that was part of the problem, is that there's not really an alternative because it works really well.
Like PCBs, you know?
Yeah.
It's tricky.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your insightful presentation. This has been wonderful. And unless anyone has anything else for the good of the order, I think we can call this the end of the meeting.
Kimberly,
Yes?
can you make sure you get this Chasing Ice posted on the district Facebook page as well?
I don't know how to do that, but yes, if you show me how, I will do that.
I don't know how.
I think
I think it's Rotary 5030.
But I would think whoever is admin for that page would have to share it onto that page.
yeah, Alan and some other people have posted it. I don't
Okay,
know where they
perfect.
posted it.
Alan might have rights on. Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah,
Because
great.
you share something to a page, but it goes into an invisible spot until someone approves it usually. But managers of that page can share something and it would show right up.
Yeah, I have no idea. I just read what's on it.
I'm kind of there with you, Mom.
Well, this was really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you again so much. And I hope that we see all of you again at another meeting. All of you are always welcome to attend different meetings that appeal to you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Take care.